up to 70b, Ayin Amid Base. And so as an introduction to this Gemara, we need to understand a little bit about the concept that we were talking about, a sin offering, a chatas offering for an inadvertent transgression. So we know that the Torah says that if somebody does a transgression of that of a mitzvah that was not supposed to be done, meaning that there's a commandment not to do something and they did it, they have to bring a sin offering. But the Torah says it in a manner where where it became known to him, he became aware of the fact that he had sinned, that he had transgressed. So we have the concept that it has to be unknown, and it became known. So one of the things we saw was in the Mishnah that somebody had the lapse, the unbeknownst to the person was that today was Shabbos. So any number of transgressions that they did is only going to be one inadvertent transgression because they only were mistaken about one concept, that today is Shabbos. As opposed to where they had multiple transgressions that they forgot about. They didn't realize that writing on Shabbos was prohibited, or they didn't realize that plowing on Shabbos was prohibited, and they did multiple things, but they knew it was Shabbos. So then for each one of them, there's going to be a transgression. A sin offering for each one is a separate transgression. What we are going to address today is we're going to see the concept that if somebody becomes aware of their mistaken transgression, but they did it multiple times, but they only became aware about one of them, will they be allowed to bring one sin offering for all of the transgressions that they did under the same context, even though that they were, even though that they only became aware, which is a prerequisite in order to bring the carbon? We saw that it has to be that they became aware that they had transgressed. It has to become aware that they had sinned. And that awareness was only on part, only one transgression or part of a transgression, we'll see, or in different manners of the transgression. For instance, they forgot it was Shabbos, but they knew that they're not allowed to plow on Shabbos. And then later on, they realized it was Shabbos, but they forgot that you're not allowed to plow. Something like that. And they bring the sin offering for one of those plowings. Will it cover the other one as well? So that's a part of what we're going to see. This concept of greira, of pulling along one transgression versus the other. And I'm going to give an outline of the Gemara because it's a little bit complex, so just so that we can understand it. Somebody forgot that it was Shabbos, woke up in the morning and plowed. So he did, actually the case of the Gemara is that he did the two transgressions he did is he harvested, meaning he cut down some grain, and then he ground it up. So he did two Torah transgressions of Shabbos. At first he did so because he knew they were prohibited. He simply had forgotten that today was Shabbos. Later on in the day, he did the same thing, knowing it was Shabbos, but having forgotten that these were prohibited. And now he wants to bring a sin offering. Will the one sin offering cover the other? So which sin did he become aware of? So the Gemara is going to say like this. If he became aware of that he had sinned having forgotten it was Shabbos, so that included both transgressions at once, because he had transgressed in the harvesting, transgressed in the grinding. Even though he did both of those transgressions, two separate transgressions, but he did them under one lapse of forgetting today was Shabbos. So bringing a sin offering for any one of them is going to cover both, because the lapse was a unifying lapse in that he forgot today was Shabbos. So any transgressions done under that lapse, under that ha'alama, not remembering it was Shabbos, will be covered. So if he brings a sin offering with the intent of that today was that he had ground the grain on Shabbos or harvested the grain on Shabbos, that will cover both of those acts. And not only that, in Greira, they will also cover the two transgressions that he had for later on in the day. Meaning, Later on in the day, he remembered it was Shabbos, but harvested and ground a second time, forgetting that those were prohibited acts. The sin offering that he brought earlier in the day, not early in the day, didn't bring it on Shabbos, but the sin offering he's going to bring midweek when he remembers that he transgressed, and he says, "Oh my goodness, I forgot it was Shabbos, and I plowed and I harvested and I ground up the grains." So that's 2 transgressions. I need to bring a sin offering for having forgotten it was Shabbos, but it covers both the grinding and the harvesting. And then it'll also cover the act that he did later on in the day, which he's not bringing the sin offering for, but it'll cover it because the grinding covers the grinding that he did later, and the harvesting will cover the harvesting that he did later. And they're all included in the one sin offering that he brings for the first the first sin of Shabbos that he did, because that was a lapse of not remembering it was Shabbos. So that covers the 2, and by greira, by pulling along, it covers the other 2 that was with it. So that's the first concept we're going to learn. We're going to see that. Now we're going to start the Gemara with that introduction on 70b, about 5 lines from the bottom. Amar Rava. Rava said, Kotzar v'tochan k'gergeres. He harvested and he ground up a grogeres size, which is a fig size. The minimum size for any transgression of Shabbos pertaining to food is a grogeres. So he used that amount. He harvested and ground that amount. 2 transgressions, but he did so b'shigya Shabbos. He forgot it was Shabbos. B'zadan malacha. He knew that these malachas are prohibited. He knew that these are prohibited work on Shabbos, but nevertheless he did so with the a mistake that today was Shabbos. He forgot today was Shabbos, and therefore he transgressed. So that counts as 1 sin offering. And then chazav v'katzav v'tachan. But then later on that day he did the same action. He harvested and ground up kurgageres, the same amount, minimum amount. B'zadan Shabbos, knowing it was Shabbos, but mishigas malachas, but he had forgotten that these were 2 prohibited acts. V'nodalo al katsira utechina shel shigas Shabbos, and then he became aware that he had sinned. And as we mentioned in the introduction, that concept that in order to bring a sin offering, you have to become aware of your sin. So he forgot the afternoon act and doesn't even remember that. But what he remembers on Tuesday morning, he wakes up, wait, Shabbos morning, I woke up and I cut down some grains and I ground them up. That's prohibited on Shabbos. I have to bring a sin offering. So he remembered, and that's a single obligation of a sin offering because his lapse was just in Shabbos. He brings that 1 sin offering, so he's bringing it for they forget that the lapse of Shabbos. They're forgetting that it was Shabbos, even though that he remembered these 2 acts were prohibited. And then after that, he remembers, oh, I also did it in the afternoon. And he remembers that he did the harvesting and also the grinding in the afternoon. So he remembers the harvesting and the grinding of the afternoon, which he did knowing it was Shabbos, but forgetting that these were 2 prohibited acts. V'shigas malachas. And now we go to Ayin Aleph, Amud Aleph, 71a. So the Gemara explains, Katsira Gereres Katsira, that the sin offering, that the 1 sin offering that he's going to bring for the morning act that was in the lapse of Shabbos, he'd forgotten that it was Shabbos. That 1 sin offering will cover the act of grinding, of the harvesting. Well, that will bring along with it the other act of harvesting, which is the afternoon act, and it'll count as a sin offering for that act as well. Utechina gareres techina, and the sin offering that he brings for the morning lapse of forgetting it was Shabbos, which covers the act of grinding, will also, that sin offering will also work and include in it the afternoon transgression of having forgotten that grinding is prohibited on Shabbos. So this is the concept of greira. As long as you have a sin offering that is a valid sin offering for this particular sin, it will count and cover that sin later on in the day. And that was done in another act. So he became aware of one. the morning act of having harvested and ground up the grains in order, but it was in a lapse of Shabbos. He forgot it was Shabbos, so one sin offering covers both. Therefore, it'll also cover the obligation of a sin offering, which would be individual sin offerings. He would have had to bring 3 sin offerings because in the afternoon, it was a lapse. He remembered it was Shabbos, but it was a lapse. He forgot that you're not allowed to grind, and he forgot that you're not allowed to harvest. So each one is a separate lapse. Nevertheless, the one sin offering for the morning transgression, which was a lapse in forgetting that it was Shabbos, will cover both because the sin offering covers grinding, and so all acts of grinding will be covered. And the sin offering covers harvesting, so all acts of harvesting will be covered. Aval, what happens if it's the other way around? Aval noidale al katsira shel zadan Shabbos. But in the afternoon, he knew it was Shabbos. What he forgot was that you're not allowed to harvest, and he forgot that you're not allowed to grind. And he only, on Tuesday morning, when he remembers about this, he says, oh my goodness, Shabbos afternoon, I harvested some grains. That's not permitted on Shabbos. Oh my goodness, I have to bring a sin offering. So it became beknownst to him that he now has to bring a sin offering for harvesting, which was an individual sin offering because he knew it was Shabbos and his lapse was in the transgression, forgetting that you're not allowed to harvest. Vishigas malachis, which is forgetting that the act is prohibited. So katsira goreres katsira. So there too, since he's bringing a sin offering for harvesting, the morning transgression of harvesting, when he knew harvesting was prohibited, but he forgot that it was Shabbos. So that harvesting is also going to be covered because the sin offering is coming for harvesting, so it'll cover the other harvesting act. Now, if we think about it, that harvesting act was done in forgetting that it was Shabbos. So the 2 acts, the harvesting and the grinding, are really considered one lapse, forgetting it was Shabbos. So if the sin offering covers the grinding of the morning, the harvesting in the morning, it must cover the grinding as well, because it was all part of one lapse of forgetting it was Shabbos. So the one offering is going to, his intent with it is for the transgression of harvesting in the afternoon when he remembered it was Shabbos but forgot that harvesting is prohibited. And that will cover the morning harvesting where he harvested on Shabbos forgetting it was Shabbos. And since that same lapse had other transgression of grinding, so it'll cover the grinding in the morning as well. So katsira gareres katsira utechina she'ima, and it'll also cover the grinding that was in that same lapse. Utechina shekenegda b'mkama medes, but the afternoon transgression of grinding, which he knew it was Shabbos. So each individual transgression is a separate lapse, a separate obligation of a carbon. That carbon has to be brought. So in the first case, one sin offering covers all 4 transgressions or 4 acts, right? Because it brings it along. In the second case, he'll have to bring two sin offerings. The one will be brought for the harvesting in the afternoon, and it'll bring along with it the morning harvesting, and with that comes along the grinding in the morning, and the grinding in the afternoon is a separate transgression and needs its own carbon. Abaya Amar, however, Abaya says, no, I agree with you, Rava, that the one carbon can bring along the other, but once it brought along the afternoon transgression of harvesting brings along the morning harvesting. Well, the morning harvesting was done in the same lapse of forgetting it was Shabbos together with the grinding. So once this carbon is covering a transgression, an inadvertent transgression of grinding, it'll bring along the afternoon grinding as well, because the sin offering is already covering grinding. Amar tachina nami goreras tachina. It'll bring along the transgression of grinding, and it'll cover that sin. Why? Shem tachina achasi. Because it is all one under the same title, under the same description of a transgression inadvertently of grinding on Shabbos. Now the Gemara is going to challenge this concept. Does Rava really follow this idea of Gereira, of one a transgression, a similar transgression being covered by the sin offering of one? Is that really true? Let's see this. Omi isle la Rava Gereira by Itmar. It was said, somebody ate 2 olive size, which is the minimum amount of a transgression of eating. So he ate 2 olive size of chelev, of the forbidden fats. In one lapse, in one mistake. So he had some meats in front of him with some fats on the meat, and he didn't realize that each one of these pieces of meat had a kazayas of chelev, of forbidden fat on it. He thought maybe it's a kosher fat, which is normal fat that we have. So he ate 2 of these, in one mistake. But he only became aware of one at first. So he now knows he's obligated in a sin offering for but one sin offering. While he still doesn't know about the second transgression, he goes ahead and eats another piece of meat, which also has chelev on it, and now he's transgressed a 3rd time. So the middle transgression of the second time he ate the chelev it overlaps with two lapses. The first one he ate in the same lapse as the second, and then became aware of the first, not of the second, and then he ate a 3rd time. So he's still unaware of the second, and he's unaware of the 3rd. So there's a lapse. The second one is a lapse that is overlapping with both. So Amar Rava. So Rava says in regards to this, Hevi karban al rishon. If he brings a sin offering only on the first one, which is the one that he became aware of at first, Rishon Hasheni miskaprim. It'll cover not only the first one, it'll even cover the second one, because it was all a part of the same lapse, even though that he didn't become aware of it at the same time, but it'll cover the same lapse. But when he finally becomes aware of the 3rd, that'll need its own sin offering. Gimel Eina Miskaper, but the 3rd one will not be covered with this one because it was never shared. It never shared a lapse and never shared an unawareness with the first first one. So the lack of awareness of his sin only overlapped with the first and the second, or the second and the 3rd, but the first one never overlapped with the 3rd, and therefore they're going to need separate sin offerings. Hevi karban al shlishi, same the other way around. If he became aware of the 3rd sin first, and he brought a sin offering for that, shlishi v'sheni miskaprim, the first and second will be covered. The second and the 3rd will be covered by that sin because he's bringing it for the 3rd, but in the same lapse, in the same lack of awareness of his sin, when he didn't know about the 3rd time he ate it, he also had the second one that he didn't know about, and he had eaten it a second time. But the one he had eaten at first was never in that lapse, and when he becomes aware of that, he's going to have to bring its own sin offering. Rishon Eina Miskaper, and he doesn't have to bring a separate offering. However, if he becomes aware of the second piece of meat that he ate that had chelev on it, so he ate one piece of chelev, prohibited fats, then he ate another one, still unbeknownst to him, and then he becomes aware of the second one that he ate, still unbeknownst to him that he ate the first. He became aware of the first, and then he ate a 3rd one, and then he became aware of that, and he brings one for the middle sin offering. The middle sin, he brings a sin offering, then it's going to cover both, because they were each, that middle one was a part of the lapse, of the lack of awareness during each one. Eina Miskaper, Hevi karban alem tzayin iskaper kulan, they all are covered. Abaya amar fili hevi karban on echad mehen iskaper kulan. However, Abaya says no. Even if he brings on any one of them that he brings a sin offering, it'll cover the others. Why? Because he says greira. Let's take the first case. He ate at 12 o'clock at noon on Sunday. He ate a piece of chelev, unbeknownst to him. 2 o'clock, he eats another piece of chelev, still unbeknownst to him. Then at 3 o'clock, he becomes aware that that meat he ate at 12 o'clock was chelev. At 5 o'clock, he eats another piece of meat that has chaylev on it, and he becomes aware of that later. So we said the middle one, the second one, was a part of the first lapse and a part of the second lapse. He was unaware of his sin while he had eaten the second one and the first. And then when he became aware of the first, so it's no longer a part of the third, but the third and second are. So whichever one he's going to bring a carbon for, it'll include the second one, because he's bringing a sin offering for the first time he ate, but in the same lapse was included the second time he ate. So it's going to cover the second. Well, the second is a part of a lapse of the third as well. And so if it covers the second, it must bring along with it the third. That's what Abaye says. So it'll always bring along, once it's a part of a second lapse, it'll bring along with it whatever's included in that second lapse. So Abaye is the one that says that nigrar, that it brings along another transgression of the same type in the same lapse. Not Rava. Rava didn't say that. So why do we say in our case that the one lapse of the morning will bring along the other transgression in that lapse? So the Gemara says, indeed, Basar deshama me Abaye Sarah. Rava accepted Abaye's reasoning, and therefore, after he accepted Abaye's reasoning, he said our halacha over here that if he had brought a sin offering for the morning lapse of forgetting Shabbos, the two transgressions that he did there are going to be included, and with it will be included all the other transgressions of the same type. And the same, if we brought one for the afternoon lapse of forgetting that harvesting is prohibited, it'll cover the morning harvesting. And with it, since in the same lapse of forgetting with Shabbos, he harvested and ground it up, so the grinding will also be included with it. So the Gemara says, wait, if he agrees to Abaye, so that let the morning transgression, which is the lack of knowledge that it was Shabbos, which includes both the harvesting in the morning and the grinding in the morning, let the morning grinding be, which is covered by this sin offering, bring along with it the afternoon transgression of grinding. And Rava doesn't say that, only Abaye does. Well, if Rava agrees to Abaye about the pulling together in the same lapse, why doesn't it pull the afternoon grinding as well? So the Gemara says, Greira Isle, one pulling along he has, Greira the Greira Lisle, but not a double level pulling along. And this is what happens. He had forgotten in the afternoon that harvesting is prohibited. So he brings a sin offering for that harvesting. With it, it'll cover another act of harvesting that he had forgotten, which is the morning where he forgot it was Shabbos entirely, and therefore he harvested. So the other one harvesting brings along the harvesting. So that's not a nigrar, that's not pulling along. That's all one act of harvesting on Shabbos, and that'll be covered. But what gets pulled along with that is, since it was under the one transgression, the one lapse of forgetting it was Shabbos, so the transgression of harvesting will bring along with it its brother transgression, which happened under the same lack of awareness that it's Shabbos. The same lapse covered the harvesting and the grinding. So grinding is pulled together. That's already one pull. Now you want to pull together the second transgression of grinding in the afternoon, which was an individual act. Rava says that's too much. Now you're going, you're creating a longer chain than is okay. It can pull along one thing, but not more than that. So again, the concept really that we're discussing is, in order to bring a sin offering, you have to become aware of the transgression, and other acts that are similar or under the same lapse will be brought along. And the question is, how far to take that? Now the Gemara says, Milsa the Pshita le Abaye and Rava. This concept is obvious to Abaye and Rava that Abaye and Rava say you can cover a sin offering that covers one prohibition, one transgression, will cover other similar transgressions or sister transgressions, meaning a transgression that happened in the same lapse. But Rabbi Zera, but that's not so clear at all to Rabbi Zera. He asked it as a question. The boy Rabbi Zera, because we see Rabbi Zera asked a question by Rabbi Asi, he asked it of Rabbi Asi. But Amrila, some say actually it wasn't that way at all. By Mine Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera, it was Rabbi Zera was the one that the question was asked to, and it was Rabbi Yirmiyah who asked the question. And the question went like this: Kotzar v'tachan chatzi grogeres b'Shabbos. Somebody harvested and ground up a half a grogeres, which we said the minimum amount that a person needs in order to transgress in anything regarding food on Shabbos is a grogeres, a fig size. But he did half the requisite amount. B'Shiga Shabbos, and he had forgotten it was Shabbos, and he did this, but it was a half the amount that in order to be half transgressed. V'zadim malachas, he knew it's prohibited act, but he forgot it was Shabbos. But then later on in the day, he remembered it was Shabbos, but forgot that these were prohibited acts, and again did half the requisite amount, half a fig's amount he harvested and ground it. Do these combine? So he responded. Rabbi Zera responded in the first version. Rabbi Zera responded. Amale, he said, "Chalukin lachatos." Well, these would be separate sin offerings, because one is a lapse of Shabbos, and the other is a lapse of the prohibited act. And since it is a lapse of Shabbos, each one a different lapse, each one's going to need its own chatas offering. And if they need their a separate chatas offering, they need the sin offering separately, so then they won't combine in the measure to be to count as one transgression, because they're separate acts. And so you never have to bring the sin offering because you never had a full amount of transgression, because the transgressions were half. Right. And any time that they would have to bring a separate sin offering, they can't combine to equal up the requisite amount. So even though this person on this particular Shabbos harvested a full fig amount, but they were done in two different lapses, he did a half a fig's worth in the morning in one lapse, forgetting it was Shabbos, and in the afternoon remembering it was Shabbos but forgetting it was a prohibited act. They won't combine, and since they won't combine, since they won't, you need a separate sin offering for each if it was the requisite amount. Now that they're not the requisite amount, they can't combine to create the obligation of the requisite amount. Gemara says, "Vatanan, wait, is that really true? What we learned? Ochal chelev v'chelev v'he'elam echad. If somebody ate, he ate twice chelev, this prohibited fats. He ate them twice. What does it mean he ate them twice? So he ate it once and then waited enough time that that the two eatings won't connect, which is called kedei achilas pras, enough time that one would eat a piece of bread. So he ate a piece of meat that had chelev on it, let's say at 12 o'clock. 12:15, he had another bite of this with the chelev on it and ate another olive size. Each one was an olive size of forbidden fats. But it was all in one lapse. He didn't realize that this was chelev. He only needs one sin offering for both of the amounts that he ate. However, if the multiple transgressions that he did was he ate in one lapse, he ate the forbidden fats and unsalted meat, so he ate some blood, and it was left over from a korban, so it was the next morning, upigul, and it was invalid korban, all in one transgression. See, he's got multiple transgressions. Chayav al kalachas v'achas. He has to bring a sin offering for each one of these transgressions. This is the strength or the stringency of different types of prohibitions over one prohibition. Because in one prohibition, even if you did it many times, the same thing, as long as it doesn't, as long as it's in one lapse, you're going to bring one sin offering. Whereas if you did multiple prohibitions, like in this case where he ate forbidden fats and blood, and it was a prohibited korban, so he's going to bring a separate sin offering for each one of the prohibitions. However, here is the strength or the stringency of one type over many different types. If he ate half a olive size, and then within the requisite amount of time, he ate another half, equaling a full eating. So he ate at 10 o'clock, he ate half an olive size of forbidden fats. And 3 minutes later, he ate another a half an olive size. They will combine into one prohibited act. Let's say 5 minutes is kedei achilas pras, what the person will eat a piece of bread. That's about what the average halachic time for that is. So he ate it within that time. The two half olives will combine because they are all of the same prohibition. So chayev, and he will have to then bring a sin offering for it. However, mishnei minim pater. But if he ate a half an olive size of forbidden fat and a half an olive size of the invalid korban, the invalid offering, and a half olive size of blood, even though that it equals more than an olive size, but they will not combine because there are different prohibitions. Pater, and therefore he doesn't have to bring a sin offering. And the Gemara analyzed this and said like this: in the first in the first statement, you said that if he had transgressed, eaten two pieces of this forbidden fat, he's going to only bring one sin offering because it was all under one lapse of not knowing that this was a prohibited fast. Do I really need to tell you this? That's obvious. It's only one lapse, one transgression. And Reish Lakish said in the name of Bar Tutani that what are we talking about in this case? The case is that they were actually two different dishes. They were made in two different recipes. The first forbidden fat was roast beef, and the second prohibited fat was in a pot, and was pot roast. And nevertheless, even though that they were two separate dishes, which according to Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Yeshua says that if they are two different dishes, they are separate sin offerings because they are separated by their type of food. I may have thought that Rabbi Yeshua not only says this as a stringency to obligate you in a second korban, but even to be lenient and to exempt you of a second korban. That he did not say it. That he only said it to obligate you in another korban, but not to exempt you of a korban. So this is a concept that Rabbi Yeshua says. We saw this in Croesus, that if somebody ate in one lapse, he ate two of the same type of food with the two olive sizes, the requisite amount, he will have to bring two sin offerings. So too over here, he would have to bring two sin offerings, and we have to say that this is that's why he says he's not going to have a second sin offering for Rabbi Yeshua. You say this according to Rabbi Yeshua at the beginning, and therefore you have a question. But I teach this on the second part, and therefore I have no question. That this is the statement of Reish Lakish is actually going at the end of the brisa. And here's the meaning. Aseifa. This, on the first part, you're right. There would be 2 sin offerings, according to Shua. What we're going on over here is that it's on the second part, which said that there's a stringency on one type, where one type of food, meaning the one prohibition of eating forbidden fats, he ate half an olive size, and a few moments later ate another half olive size. They will combine. That, what he says, the idea is that they were in two separate dishes, and nevertheless they're going to count, and that's what we needed to teach you. And therefore it's no question. Mishnei meaning potter. We said if there were 2 separate type of dishes, they're going to be exempt. But if it's one type, it's 2 separate things, it's going to be exempt. I need to tell you, if you had a half a olive of blood and a half a olive of forbidden fats, that they're not going to combine. No, we're really talking about that it was one type of food. Both were forbidden fats. So why is it called 2 separate types? Doesn't mean blood and forbidden fats. It means forbidden fats and forbidden fats, but they're considered 2 types on account of that one was pot roast and one was grilled or roasted. So they're 2 different dishes. Rabbi Yeshua, and this is the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, the Amar Tamchuim Mechalkin, who said that different dishes separate them. So this is the Chiddush. That Rabbi Yeshua said this both in being strict and obligating you 2 separate carbons. And so if somebody ate a full olive size of roast beef, forbidden fats, and then pot roast forbidden fats, or grilled forbidden fats, or whatever it may be, they're going to count as 2, even though it's under one lapse, it's going to count as 2 separate transgressions, and he's going to have to bring 2 sin offerings. But since he's going to have to bring 2 sin offerings, that means that they're 2 separate foods. As such, they will not combine, and even as a leniency, he's going to say, you had a half an olive size of grilled beef that had chaylev on it, and then you ate that, and then 2 minutes later, you ate another half an olive size of forbidden fats, but that was in a pot roast. They were not going to combine because they're 2 separate things, according to Rabbi Yeshua. So the Gemara explains. Now in this brisa, midaseifa min echad v'shnei tachon, since the end of the brisa was talking about that it was one type of meat, one type of prohibition, meaning chaylev, but they counted as 2 separate things on account of it being in 2 separate dishes. So then the halacha would be, and we're now on 71b, mechlal dereisha min echad v'tamcha echad. So that means that the beginning, where it does combine them, is talking about that it was the same pot roast, it was all the same dish, and it was all the same prohibition of forbidden fats. So I need to tell you that if you had in one lapse 2 pieces of forbidden fat cooked in the same pot, why would I think you need 2 separate prohibition, 2 separate sin offerings? To tell you that there was a knowledge between them. And this is what he means. That Rabbi Gamliel says that you had a half an olive size of forbidden fats cooked in the same pot and you as your next half olive size, and nevertheless they will not combine. Because Rabbi Gamliel says this. We said in order to become obligated in a sin offering, you have to become aware of the lapse and the mistake you made. So he ate a half olive size of forbidden fats, and then somebody says, that's forbidden fat. That's chaylev. How are you eating that? He says, oh my goodness, you're right. I have to bring a sin offering. Oh no, I don't, because it wasn't enough, because it was less than an olive size. 2 minutes later, he's chatting and talking, and he doesn't realize, and he eats another piece of that same meat, and he ate another half olive size. But he was already aware of his transgression beforehand. And that awareness did not obligate him in a sin offering because it was not the requisite amount. Rabbi Gamliel says the two halves cannot combine because there was a yediyah ben time, there was an awareness of the sin in between, and that will negate the first half because it wasn't enough to obligate him, but he was already aware. So that became obligated, but not enough of it to obligate him of a carbon, and it will not combine with the second lapse. We have another few minutes. Let's begin the next section. So Itmar, it was said, somebody ate two forbidden fats in one lapse. At first he became aware that he had transgressed once. And then he became aware again after that about the second one. Now the Gemara doesn't tell us in this question. And what did he do? Did he became aware that he's obligated a carbon and a sin offering? Did he designate that sin offering? Did he actually bring the sin offering before he found out about the second one? In any case, he became aware he had done in one lapse. On Sunday, he ate at 1 o'clock one olive size of forbidden fat, and then at 2 o'clock he ate another olive size of forbidden fat, all under one lack of awareness. So in the one lapse, he forgot. He did two transgressions, but they're in the one lapse. But he only became aware of one, and then somehow designated or brought a carbon, a sin offering. Will that cover the second one or not? So Rabbi Yochanan says he must bring two sin offerings because he became aware of one, and as we'll see later, the Gemara either designated a carbon for it already, or actually brought a carbon, a sin offering for it already. Rish Lakish says, no, the one will cover both sins. Rabbi Yochanan has a verse that indicates it. Because it says that he will bring a sin offering, al chatasa vehevi. Upon his sin, he will bring. So it has to be the sin that he knows of, and it's a full sin. Rish Lakish says, no. Because it says of his sin that he has done, and it will be atoned for. So we see that the atonement could be even for part of the knowledge, even though there was more that happened that he wasn't even aware of. Rish Lakish, what's the Rish Lakish going to do with the verse that Rabbi Yochanan has, which says al chatoso for his sin, which indicates the entire sin? Rish Lakish aksiva chatoso vehevi hahula acha kapara. He's going to say, no, that's only if he actually brought the sin offering already. He brought the sin offering, that's fully atoned for. He can't now cover retroactively another sin he became aware of. Rabbi Yochanan, what about Rabbi Yochanan? He says that, what's he going to do with the Rish Lakish's verse that says of the sin that he did, meaning indicating it doesn't have to be the complete sin. His case is similar to the previous cases that we saw, and here's what happened. He ate in one lapse an olive and a half worth of forbidden fats. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, he ate an olive-sized forbidden fat. 10:03, he ate a half olive size. At 10:05, he becomes aware that he ate the first olive size. He's now obligated in a sin offering. He did not become aware about the half. And then within the requisite amount for it to combine, he ate another half olive size. Now here, we have an interesting thing. He became aware of part of the first lapse, but not the whole first lapse. And if the first lapse, the part covers the half olive size as well, there's nothing left to combine to the second sin. So I may have thought it should combine. Kamash Malan, it does not combine because the first one will cover, since the sin offering covered part of that lapse, it'll cover the rest, the other half olive size, and therefore there's nothing left to combine to the second half olive size, and he won't have to bring a second sin offering. Tomorrow we'll continue with the discussion about Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan's this concept of if he became aware of one of the sins that he did in a lapse, does it or not cover the other sin that happened in that same lapse of awareness?